Today I'm going to be tying a midge pattern. I think the creator is probably Galloup. That's the only person that I've ever seen tie it. I think it's called the Gallup's Goober Midge. And this is actually a really good pattern for lots of things. Hopefully we'll talk about a little bit as we're filming today. I've got a size 16 just dry fly hook in the vise. I'm using the TroutFly 18-aught nano silk in black. And I've transitioned to the nano silk here just because we're going to be tying in some deer hair. And I can really crank down a lot better with this nano silk without breaking my thread. So we're going to start out with some super fine dubbing, and you just need a wisp of it. And we're going to basically tie this, as Kelly, kind of talks about, as he's tying it in 3 different parts. And you'll kind of see that as we tie it. So there are a couple of things that I really like about this pattern. One is if you're a beginning tyer, this is a great, from my perspective anyway, a great fly for you to practice with, because it's going to use several different techniques that will strengthen your fly tying tremendously. So we're going to build in a tiny little taper here. We're not going to build in much of a taper, but a tiny little taper here. Yeah, there we go. I want to get that to stop right about there. So we've got a nice, again, we're not looking for a huge body, not by a long shot. And what we're going to tie in here is just going to be some flash material. In this case, I'm just going to use some polar flash. And I'm just going to actually grab one good looking strand of this and cut it free from the whole glob of material here. I know I put that up to the camera and you can't tell what the hell it is, but I'm trying. There we go. So I've got one piece, and that's it, of this polar flash. I am just going to double it over, just like so, I'm creating a loop in it. And then I'm going to just come in with my scissors and I'm going to cut that right in the middle of that loop and put my scissors back. So I will end up trimming this material if I want to be, not using too much material. I'm not overly concerned here, but since we're going to be trimming off the back here, I'm not overly concerned about length, other than if you're trying to preserve some of your materials and not use quite as much. Then you're going to just want it to be a little bit shorter. So that's longer than I need. So I've tied those 2 pieces in. Remember, I cut it in half. And what I'm going to do is I've got the balance of my material here. I'm just going to bend it backwards as well. The first one I try to keep a little bit to one side of the hook, and then I'm going to actually tie the second bunch in a little bit off center, so it's not quite centered up here. And I can go ahead and pull fairly tight here, but hopefully you can kind of see that at this point. I'm going to just go ahead and make my cut on this end of it anyway, so I don't have all those fibers in my way as I'm working on tying the fly. But hopefully you can see there what that looks like. We've got some of the fibers coming off the side, some going closer to right down the middle of the hook. So from here, that's part 1. So we're gonna grab ourselves a tiny little bit more of the super fine black dubbing, and we're gonna tie up to the next third of the hook here. So get that kind of dubbed on my thread here, hold my head thread straight up and tighten it down a little bit like that. And then I'm going to take some wraps backwards just to make sure I'm covering up over that flash material there. And knowing that I have 3 parts that I'm going to be working on here, I really want to be sure that I don't end up crowding the head of the fly. So I don't want this to go too much further than where it is right now. In fact, that's just about exactly where I want it. So we're kind of here in this position with the fly at this point. So this is one of those first techniques, and I know I've shown it on some of my other videos, and I'm still working on figuring out a way to shoot one where it's a little bit easier for you to see what I'm doing, and I'm still working on that. But we are going to tie in some deer hair at this point, and we're going to make a deer hair wing. So here's my deer hair clump that I just took off of the skin. Here's the back end of my deer hair, the cut ends that I just cut off of the skin. As I've showed before, you always want to comb this out. So I have in this case, a loon comb, and I'm going to pinch these really tight between my finger and forefinger just so I don't lose too many of these fragments. And then I'm just going to run several times through this material here, trying to get some of that under fur out. And then I'm going to basically, I'm going to switch hands. Okay, so I'm not worried at all, in fact, about alignment here. All I'm worried about right now is getting any underhair out of here with this comb. So we're going to just come back in here with our comb again, towards the tips here, and run that through a couple of times. And that should do us. You can see here the alignment of the tips of this deer hair. That's what the stacking is all about. And you can see my cut ends back here, and hopefully even with the macro lens you're not seeing either any or very much under fur there. From there I'm just going to grab my hair stacker. I'm just going to use my good old trusty brass one that's, it's 2 pieces. And it's got this nice cone on the top that will allow me to put this material in. I want to put my deer hair into my stacker with the tips going in first, just like so. And once I have them in there, I'm just going to hold this thing straight upright, and you'll hear it but not see it. Kind of tapping on the table there. So now that I've got my hair stacked, I've got little fibers there that will bother me, but hopefully that's what the hair stacker will do. If you want to rewind the video a little bit and look back, notice how these tips are now nicely aligned, and that's what we want here, is a nice alignment. The next thing I'm going to do is look at the measurement here, and I want those, I want this tail to just barely go over the back end of this hook. So I will measure it like that, put it where I want it, and then I'm going to pinch that with my fingers, keeping those tips pinched tight so that I don't lose that alignment. And then I'm just going to cut this off, and I'm going to cut it off very close to my fingers. So now you've got something that looks more like this. And we're doing that because that way we can actually make a really nice little head on this thing, even though it's not the head. But we don't have to do any trimming at all. So what is really important is that I turn my thread counterclockwise here. And you'll see as I lift my thread like that, notice how it goes towards the back end of my hook. That's what I want. Because now I can sit this material kind of in place like so. And when I bring this thread over, it's going to want to jump back towards the bend of the hook, and it basically will make it so I'm not fighting getting these in place. And once I get that wrap in there, I'll just take one tug down on it pretty good and tight. This again is nano silk, which is really handy. So now we've got our hair wing on our Goober Midge, and we're just going to go ahead from here, and we're going to wrap forward And the last operation we're going to do is we're going to tie in, we're going to put some more dubbing in, but we're going to tie in a grizzly hackle. That will be this last third of this pattern. So all I'm doing here, I want to, whenever I'm using hackle, I try to create as even of a pathway that it's tying around. So that's all I'm doing here, is just trying to get this evened out a little bit so that it's not a sheer drop off towards the eye of the hook. And being nano silk, it doesn't build up any bulk, which means I have to take a lot of turns to make that happen, which is okay. So now we'll go back to about that location there. And we're going to use a grizzly saddle. I've got the whole hackle there, but I have one over here cheating a little bit on the side that I've been using to tie these, and I've already pre-measured this. I'm tying a 16, so I'll measure this on my hackle gauge, which looks like that. And basically, I'll just wrap that hackle around that gauge, and when I pull it tight, I can start to get an idea of what is the right hook size here for this particular hackle. And in this case, I picked it all out. So like I said, I cheated a little bit, but at the same time, I want my hackle to be a little bit bigger than a 16, even though this is a 16. So I tend to just go just a tiny bit bigger than I necessarily need to. So what I'm going to do, here's my hackle feather. And as you can see, it's really long, and it's a whiting, which I love because it's very stiff hackles. They stick up really nice, less likely to break on me than other hackles that I've used. And consistency in terms of from here all the way clear up to here, it's almost identical. So I can tie probably at least a dozen, if not more, flies with this one piece of hackle. So what I've done to prepare this is I've kind of come in and I've taken those fibers and stood some of them up, and I'm going to clip those off. I take a couple of turns here. I'm going to pull this hackle back towards the eye of the hook because I do want to get a wrap or two behind it as well to lock that into place. And then once I have that pretty well locked in place, I'm going to go ahead and take a few turns up towards the front. I'm not going to go all the way up to the eye. I'll just take a few wraps like that. From there, I'm just going to turn my vise sideways and prop up and cut off the excess there, as well as this little straggler who decided he wanted to spoil the party. So I've cut that off. But my hackle now should be really nice and secure. We're just going to come back towards where the hackle wrapping is going to start, and we're going to put one more really fine layer of super fine black here up towards the top that will be basically tying our hackle through. Again, it may look on camera like there's a whole lot here, but there really isn't. This is just literally a wisp. Which is what we want. So we'll go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and secure that. But I've got my dubbing on. I'm going to try to take this hackle and again pull it forward and get a couple of wraps behind that hackle with the dubbing material. And that just helps us cover up just the tiniest little bit of the cut ends off of that deer hair. And then after we've taken a couple of wraps there, we'll go ahead and let that hackle move backwards. I'll just keep working on making sure that my dubbing is fairly tight as I work my way up towards the eye of the hook. So just like so, we'll back that off a little bit, tighten that up a little bit more. You can go in reverse when you're tying flies. You may not have known that, but you truly can. So here we go. I've left myself a little bit of space here at the eye of the hook. I'm going to take my hackle now that I just tied in, and we're only going to do 3 or 4 wraps here. So, but I do want one wrap to be right in front of the next wrap be right in front of the wrap before it. So that's where I will be a little bit more deliberate here. And I'm pulling hard enough that I can get that to sink in, but not so hard that it's breaking off. And from there, I'm just going to kind of, wiggle my thread around a little bit and try to lock this hackle feather into place on the front end of our hook here. With 2 or 3 thread wraps are fine, probably. And once I've got that done, I'm going to go ahead and take a few wraps on this side of it as well. And then from there, I am able to kind of turn my vise upside down and see where that hackle fiber is coming out. And we're going to give it a clip so that it comes off. And like I said, I still have enough to, do several more flies here. So I'm just going to sit that over to the side for a moment. And then from here, I'm going to give myself a little bit of extra thread so that I'm ready to do my whip finish here. We'll do a 3 or 4 turn whip finish here. So I got my whip finisher out with my thread. I'm going to try not to capture too many, if any, of those hackle fibers as I do that. I'm going to pull that tight. So there we go. We got my knot in place. I'm going to go ahead and reel in some of my thread here. I'm going to turn this upside down, and I'm going to just reach in with my scissors here, and we're going to cut that thread off now. Kind of just like so. I don't want to butt my scissors away quite yet. We will put some head cement on here. But the very first thing we did was tied in this flash material. And I want it to just barely be longer than where that wing is laying. So I am going to trim it, but not enough. But it's going to be enough that it's going to give this a little bit of a pop or a flash when you're using it out on the river. So there you have it. This pattern is complete. The Goober Midge. Like I said, there are a couple of reasons that I really like this fly. One is it's a really good learning fly because you're going to be dubbing, which is a technique you're going to need to learn as you're tying flies. You can get a lot of practice in tying in a deer or a hare wing on the fly and doing it the right way, and hopefully I got that fairly close. So you learn that skill with this fly. And then we also end up with some hackle. So you get some practice in tying up your hackle. So it's a great fly to just do over and over again and learn some of these techniques that are going to just crazy open up opportunities for you in fly tying. Other thing that I really like about it, first is the midge. They hatch all season long, so it's a really nice dry midge pattern. It's kind of like a Griffith's gnat to a certain extent, so it's probably representing like a clump of midges, not just one midge, but that's the Griffith's gnat is really just, if you look at the pattern, it's really just a whole bunch of midges or gnats, as we call them, glommed together. And so that's what this will look like. The hairs here is going to give it buoyancy and put it properly on the water for us. The other thing that I really like about this pattern is, and I'm sure he intended it from the very beginning, is this will also work as a caddis. I mean, let's just be real. There's not much difference between this and some of the caddis patterns that I'll tie, other than the black body. Usually I'll be using an olive or a tan. But this one is going to go out there on the water, and it might be a midge and it might be a caddis. But whatever it might be, it's going to catch you some fish. So grab some hooks and get your vise and go to town.